What if the person you thought you knew was cold, untouchable, and impossibly powerful was secretly living a second life at night, one that could shatter careers, heal broken families, and change your own destiny forever? Before this story unfolds, hit subscribe now, because what you're about to hear isn't just drama, it's a reminder that the people at the top are often carrying the heaviest secrets, and missing even one chapter could mean missing the truth. Marcus Hale never expected his life to narrow into a quiet loop of early mornings, school lunches packed with careful precision, and late nights balancing spreadsheets at a glass tower owned by one of the most ruthless CEOs in the city. But that was exactly where he found himself at 34, a widowed single father to a bright-eyed 7-year-old named Lily, and a mid-level analyst at Astron Dynamics, where Eleanor Blackwood ruled like an ice queen carved from ambition and discipline, a woman whose presence alone could silence a room, whose tailored suits and controlled expressions gave nothing away, and whose reputation for firing executives without blinking had become corporate legend. Yet Marcus stayed because stability mattered more than pride now, because Lily needed piano lessons and warm dinners and the certainty that tomorrow would come with lights still on, and so he worked late one Thursday night after everyone else had gone, chasing a deadline that Eleanor herself had demanded by morning, only to realize he'd left his laptop charger in his car, forcing him down into the underground parking structure where shadows pulled between concrete pillars and fluorescent lights hummed like tired insects. And that was when he saw her, not the CEO in heels and power suits, but Eleanor Blackwood in a worn hoodie, sleeves pushed up, hair tied back messily, kneeling beside a van with its doors open, unloading boxes with a speed and focus that looked practiced rather than spontaneous, boxes marked with handwritten labels, food, meds, blankets, and before he could retreat unnoticed, another figure approached her, a teenage boy with a limp, followed by a woman clutching a child, and Eleanor's voice, unmistakable even when softened, gave calm instructions, reassurance, directions to a building Marcus hadn't noticed before, a hidden stairwell leading somewhere below street level, and his heart began to pound not with fear but confusion, because this wasn't a publicity stunt or a photo op. There were no cameras, no assistants, no security detail, just Eleanor Blackwood doing something that didn't fit the story everyone told about her, and Marcus should have walked away, should have minded his own business, but exhaustion and curiosity held him there as he watched her lift a heavy box with a grunt that proved she was human after all, and when she finally noticed him standing frozen between two cars, their eyes locked, her expression hardened instantly, all warmth vanishing behind a familiar corporate mask, and she said his name. Not shouted, not whispered, but spoken with dangerous clarity, Mr. Hale, and in that moment he expected to be fired, escorted out, erased, yet instead she studied his face as if weighing a decision that had nothing to do with quarterly profits, and the silence stretched until Marcus, surprising even himself, said quietly that his daughter volunteered at a food drive with her school, that he knew how heavy those boxes were, that he wasn't here to report anything, and Eleanor's jaw tightened before she turned back to the van, tossing him a pair of gloves without ceremony, and something inside him shifted as he caught them, realizing that whatever he'd stumbled into was bigger than a job, bigger than fear, and when she finally asked, without looking at him, why he was still standing there, Marcus whispered the words that would change both their lives forever, "Let me join." By the third night Marcus returned to the underground space beneath the abandoned municipal building. It no longer felt like an accident but a choice, one that tugged at him even as he tucked Lily into bed with stories about brave explorers and secret heroes, because down there, beneath the city's noise and ambition, Eleanor Blackwood was building something invisible yet vital, a network of night shelters, mobile clinics, and skill workshops for people who had slipped through every crack the system offered, and Marcus learned quickly that this operation predated his employment by years, that Eleanor had started it after her own childhood spent in foster homes and temporary beds, a past she guarded more fiercely than her company's trade secrets, and as nights passed, the power dynamic between them shifted in subtle ways, not romantically at first but humanly, as they sorted supplies side by side, shared silent exhaustion, and navigated moments of quiet crisis, like when a veteran with shaking hands broke down mid-sentence or when a pregnant woman arrived with nowhere left to go. And Marcus saw Eleanor not as a tyrant but as someone carrying responsibility like a personal debt, someone who demanded perfection at work because failure elsewhere had once cost her everything, and yet the risk was enormous, because Astron Dynamics was in the middle of a high-stakes acquisition, and if word got out that its CEO was diverting time, resources, or even attention to unsanctioned humanitarian work, the board would tear her apart, and the tension exploded the night Marcus discovered the books, not financial ledgers but coded schedules and encrypted contacts linking Astron's logistics arm to nighttime deliveries, a vulnerability that could be misinterpreted as fraud, and when he confronted Eleanor, not accusing but warning, she reacted with fury sharp enough to cut. accusing him of forgetting his place, of confusing kindness with entitlement, until Marcus snapped back that he knew exactly what it meant to lose everything, that Lily had lost her mother because of a drunk driver who never faced consequences, that systems failed people every day, and that he wasn't trying to expose her. He was trying to protect her, and the argument ended not with resolution but with silence, a heavy pause broken only when Eleanor admitted, in a voice stripped bare, that the board was already suspicious, that an internal audit loomed, and that if this operation was discovered, she would resign before letting it be dismantled, and it was then Marcus made another impossible choice, offering to help redesign the entire system, to separate it cleanly from the company while secretly strengthening it, to use his analytical skills not for profit margins but for survival, and over weeks of sleepless nights, trust rebuilt itself in careful layers as they worked in tandem, neither above nor below the other, just two adults shaped by loss and responsibility, and though something unspoken grew between them, it was restrained by fear, by boundaries, by the knowledge that the smallest misstep could cost Marcus his job and Eleanor her empire, yet fate didn't wait for permission, because the audit arrived early, triggered by a rival executive hungry for Eleanor's throne, and as investigators closed in, Marcus was forced to choose whether to stay invisible or step fully into the fire beside her. The day everything nearly collapsed began like any other, with Marcus walking Lily to school and promising to be home for dinner, unaware that by nightfall his name would be whispered in boardrooms and his integrity tested under fluorescent lights, because when the audit exposed irregularities, Eleanor did the unthinkable. She stood before the board and told a partial truth, admitting to a private initiative funded entirely from her own compensation, daring them to accuse her of anything illegal, and when the rival executive presented distorted data implicating Marcus as a facilitator, the room turned cold, but instead of denying his involvement, Marcus stepped forward, explaining the system with clarity and precision, reframing it not as a liability but as a future-facing social infrastructure that had already reduced turnover, improved public sentiment, and opened new markets, speaking not as a rebel but as a strategist, and the gamble paid off when one board member, then another, began to see what Eleanor had always seen, that profit without purpose was brittle, and after hours of brutal debate, the decision came down not to dismantle the operation but to spin it off as an independent foundation, publicly supported, transparently governed, with Eleanor remaining CEO and Marcus offered a new role bridging both worlds, and when the dust settled, when headlines painted Eleanor as either a visionary or a manipulator depending on who wrote them, Marcus returned home to Lily waiting up past bedtime, asking if he'd save the city like the heroes in her books, and he smiled, realizing that real heroism didn't look like spotlights or speeches but like quiet persistence, and weeks later, on another late night beneath the city, as they locked up the now official Foundation space, Eleanor finally allowed herself to breathe, to laugh softly at the absurdity of it all, and when she thanked Marcus not as an employee but as an equal, the air between them shifted again, gentler now, grounded not in secrecy but choice, and whatever the future held, romance or not, certainty or risk, it would be built on truth, on shared values, and on the night a single dad followed his curiosity into a parking garage and dared to whisper, "Let me join," changing not just a CEO's secret, but both their lives forever. If this story moved you, surprised you, or made you see power and compassion differently, don't forget to subscribe, because the next story might feel like fiction, until you realize it's closer to reality than you ever imagined.